Let's stay in the state of Florida, though, to your point about the Saints, and then really actually moving over to the Buccaneers and their putrid offensive performance. A lot of theories being thrown around Fox Sports Radio and National Sports Talk Radio about what's wrong with the Buccaneers. Who's the problem? Is it Bruce Arians? Is it Tom Brady? Is it Byron Leftwich? If you run the ball 4 times in a game, you get whatever you yes. had coming to you. Like that to me, whatever Brady is, we can talk all of that. But for the simple fact, and I know that there were 5 carries, but the kneel down by Gabbert at the end doesn't count. When you only commit to handing the ball off 4 times in a game, you get what you deserve in those situations.
I concur, right? You got to try to establish some balance. Why did you bring Leonard Fournette in? Maybe he's not 100%, but if he's up and ready to play, get the helmet on and get out there and try to get the sledgehammer working. If nothing else, you're keeping that Saints offense out of the line of fire as well and trying to get some sort of rhythm, right? Because it's all about creating a rhythm, play action passes and all of that with Tom Brady. It's all timing. So, and look, we've talked about their offensive line for weeks, Dan, and they just got eaten up by what New Orleans has, and that's 2 games. Look, Brady's got 7 interceptions on the year. 5 of them are against New Orleans. Right?
Wow.
And Bruce Arians talked about the fact that Mike Evans was open on some plays. I haven't had a chance to review the all 22, but Marshawn Lattimore certainly went to Twitter and took the victory lap on anybody that mentioned how few targets that Evans had because this has become a pattern when these two meet. And this was the year, as we talked about on the last podcast, that it appeared that back 7 of New Orleans was more vulnerable than they'd been. And we saw none of it. We saw a lifeless Brady and company, and we know the ebb and the flow of this team through the first 9 weeks of the season. There's going to be some big outbursts, and there's going to be some muted games where that defense is going to have to come up and show up in a big way. And here, you got the intersection of neither of them working when you had our Venn diagram. Both things failed. You mentioned, though, on Friday in our last podcast about Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore. And whether Bruce Arians says he was open or not, I think that's more of trying to, A, maybe stick one to Lattimore, 2, try to give one to Evans, but see another bit of, hey, let's maybe try to light something under Tom Brady's fire. Yeah. I just go back to, and if you have Leonard Fournette on your team, you didn't think that he was going to be the pass option that he ended up being for Tampa Bay. He played 2/3 of the snaps. Ronald Jones just doesn't seem to have much rhythm in catching the football. Jones had 3 carries, but was out-snapped 2-1 by Leonard Fournette. But I'll tell you, I should say I don't want either of them. I do think that Tampa Bay will try to turn things around against Carolina, maybe try to do we got so far away with it, let's try to do it the next week. But of the wide receivers, of Evans, of Godwin, of Antonio Brown, you're rolling the dice to get 2.8 points or 3.8 points when you're playing any 3 of those guys, and I don't trust it, and it's kind of the same old theory. And now if you look at what happens when Brady just throws it around the lot. The guys still don't put up points. Well, I mean, look at you have a drop pass from Gronkowski in the end zone, so there's another guy that's leeching into your targets and your opportunities, and they had to kill off our guy Scotty Miller, who was a great talking point here for us for a number of weeks by bringing in Antonio Brown. But, yeah, I mean, when you've got to spread it out, it's much like we were talking about on the other side with New Orleans, right? They put up 38 points. But you didn't have any massive performances from anybody that you trumpeted on the way home, right?
Yeah.
And with Tampa, you're banking on Mike Evans for the red zone look because his yardage totals have been nothing to write home about. Godwin's been hurt much of the year, so you hang a star on that. And then Gronk seems to have worked himself back into shape, but drops what should have been a touchdown pass. Does that change the game? Probably not. But it's points just the same. And when we're sitting here talking fantasy fortunes, that's a pretty big deal. When it is delivered, you got to finish it. Ronald Jones, I mean, we talked about it last week. A couple of receptions where he had to go down to his knees to make sure he hauled the ball in. And he was a guy that was already suspect in protections. And, look, I give him credit. There was a lot of talk in the offseason that he just worked on his receiving endlessly. It's still a ways away.
Yeah. And I would just say with the Ronald Jones situation, and it's why actually I have Ronald Jones in one of my leagues. I'm torn on whether you play him in Week 10 against the Panthers. For what I said is I think that the Buccaneers understand that where they went wrong, but it's also of their best win of the season was at home against Green Bay when they dominated that game, and they dominated it somewhat on the shoulders of Ronald Jones. And so that tells me that maybe Week 10 can be the turnaround and the correct that you have to do with the Buccaneers, but I'm not trusting anybody for the long term, maybe just trying to look for a value play. I mean, Antonio Brown comes in midseason and plays 4 fewer snaps than Mike Evans? What?
Welcome to Tampa Bay, where Bruce Arians doesn't care who he offends.
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed a mess. And it could be a 1 week sort of thing, but it just, they seem to be veering off and kind of trying to add something when they didn't necessarily need to.
Yeah, fifth most fantasy points allowed to running backs, Carolina, to, embolden and underscore your point.